She has worked with a number of various agencies, education entities, nonprofits, private sector, governments, all to help them figure out how to embody sustainability within their practices. She has a great background from arts, social psychology, in addition to 20 years of architecture and consulting experience to bring a very unique perspective to our collective challenge. So if you would help me in welcoming Barbra to the stage.
Thank you so much, Tracy and USGBC. You guys are great, and I'm really, really happy to be here. Although I have to say, after that lunch, which I scarfed down in about 3 seconds, I'm really ready for a nap. So as Tracy said, I have kind of an interesting background. My friends call me a recovering architect. It's a long recovery process. In the course of my history, after leaving mainstream architecture, I've had the privilege of working with all kinds of different universities and government, local governments, and private sector businesses to help them figure out how do we do this thing? How do we get our arms around this? Some companies were 20 people, some companies we work with are 6,000 people. So you can imagine that the scale challenges really differ from one to another. How many people in the room heard me like 2 weeks ago at AIA here? All right, thank God there's only one up here. So this is, I'm gonna make some intentional mistakes and you have to find them and catch them. No, I'm kidding. All right. So SPI, I started on my path leaving traditional practice in 1998 and founded one of the organizations that was one of the 6 affiliates of USGBC. So for those of you who don't know, because most people don't, affiliates pre-existed chapters, and they were organizations that had similar missions and were partners with USGBC. So I was the president of our USGBC affiliate in Massachusetts for 9 years, and now there's an independent chapter that was rolled out. So, you know, I get where you are and where you're living. And I also just want to, thankfully was reminded, I want to just make a quick footnote. One of my personal heroes and mentors, Gail Lindsay, is from here, and I just want to honor her, and her presence is always with us everywhere we are. All right, so what am I going to do? I'm going to take you on a whirlwind tour, answering hopefully, or bringing up answers to these questions. What is the problem? What's the new design paradigm that we have to deal with? Why do we struggle so much? With all the marketing that goes on, that has to go on from all of our companies, where are we actually? Where are we really? And what are the secrets of being a top firm? Now, I'm going to keep saying firm, and primarily it sounds like I'm focusing on architecture, engineering, and construction, but we've worked with the property owners, city governments creating programs, so most of what I'm saying actually can apply to anyone, so don't take my language to be literal. And then finally, I'm going to talk about some tools that hopefully you've never heard of and can be very helpful to you in your work going forward. Now, I also have to say that I'm doing a workshop at 3:30, so so what I'm going to do here is hit the highlights and the big picture, and then in the workshop at 3:30, I'm going to get down into the details and specifics of how you do this stuff at a much more granular level. So if you're interested in both sides of that, come to the 3:30 session. Hopefully people at 3:30 will have been here. So what's the problem? Well, we all know lots of scary statistics. We see the news, we see our Facebook feeds, Twitter, and we know that we have a big challenge ahead of us. Now, some of the conversation earlier this morning, this afternoon, I want to put out there, I don't care if you believe in climate change or you don't believe in climate change. You don't have to pick even a side to care about what these issues are, because there are some very practical, on-the-ground issues that are facing us. So I want to put that out there first of all. I mean, we know, buildings are the lion's share of the issue if you are on the side of the climate change believers and advocates. and contribute to the lion's share of GHG emissions. When you look at that in terms of the density and the shifting trend towards higher density, especially when we look at emerging markets that dwarf us, like China, the problem multiplies. The impacts of this, if you don't believe in climate change, and I'm not here to argue one way or another right now, we have some very, very real impacts that we have to deal with from a financial standpoint, from a community or management and population management standpoint. Lots of things from unbreathable air to flooded communities to the stranded polar bears. We have lots of impacts that we have to deal with as communities with no cash reserves saved up to deal with that. I mean, New Orleans, how many years has it been still dealing with the aftermath? And New Jersey, and New York, I mean, it's everywhere. This is a pretty famous picture of New York City's financial district after Superstorm Sandy. This is in my hometown in Boston. These are very real. I don't care if you don't believe in climate change, we got to deal with this stuff, and the storms' intensity and number of storms are increasing over time. They're not decreasing. And we know, historically, that these impacts live on in communities and impact them for many generations. Now, that's my hometown, right? This is my hometown on climate change, okay? Boston, and lots of exposed sea, right? This is Boston projected at 2030. Now, I'm going to be in my 60s at 2030. I'm going to be around. I have 4 kids. They'll be around. We have to do some serious planning and some serious thinking about our infrastructure and our economic development and all kinds of questions. Now, the good news is, as Ed Masria recently presented at Greenbuild, we have started to do things differently. So, yay us. We're doing some things differently. And that's really important because if we continue to meet the levels of predicted and designed energy conservation that the leaders in this community are actually achieving, we have, we're on a good path to actually turn the tide on what we're doing in our built environments, which is really, really important because, you know, this is a big opportunity. And the companies that are smart are seeing this as an opportunity, as a business opportunity. And there are new emerging businesses all the time that are reaping the benefits. Heard about another one today. We're looking at 900 billion square feet. Like, I don't even know what that means, honestly. I can't wrap my mind around that. And look at the distribution. 38% of the new construction is going to be in China. Now, that may not be many of your companies, but there are many companies in the U.S., some in North Carolina, whose offices are doing a lot of work in China, in UAE. And if you look at North America and China together, that's 53% of that, you know, unbelievable billions of square feet. So that's an opportunity waiting to happen. And the best part of it is, as you know, you're the choir, we're all preaching to you, the savings in cash is very significant. And based on the projections and the calculations, 2030 has been promoting a lot. We've been able to save $4.52 trillion in energy dollars based on the new paradigm for meeting this new design challenge, to actually design as if microclimate matters, as if the sun does rise in the east and set in the west, as opposed to many years before where our buildings actually did not recognize this. So we're not talking about rocket science here. So the change is coming. The tipping point, some people say it's here. I don't think it's here yet. But we're seeing a lot more in our community about net zero, about living building challenge. No offense to LEED, but we're hearing about beyond LEED, which in my opinion is a very good thing, because I don't consider LEED, as loyal as I am to USGBC and LEED, I don't consider LEED to be the goal state. I think that's something we should have a capacity to be able to do, but it's not the beacon for the future. So thinking beyond that, I think, is very inspiring, and to see that our leadership is doing that is important. Now back to those pictures of Boston before and after climate change. Cities are starting to take this seriously. Not just cities, universities, corporations are starting to, this is just emerging, starting to do adaptation and resiliency planning, which is very practical. What does it mean for universities? Tufts University, we're working with them in our second year on their whole sustainability initiative, and in particular, integrating that with resiliency planning. What does that mean? It means considering what are the peak heating and cooling periods of the year that they want to shift classes so that they're not having to meet those peak heating and cooling loads. Where they're locating equipment, in their master plan, how they're going to deal with a new central plant. There's very practical things that have to be involved in. For all of these resiliency planning processes, whether it's New York City or Boston or LA or San Francisco or Chicago, it's a public-private sector partnership. This is not because the cities are saying, you know, oh, as a civic leader, we need to be responsible. No, the business community is freaked out. You know, we're losing money. You know, these things are risks and liabilities, so we have to come together and collaborate, public-private sector partnerships, to plan how are we going to deal with this and mitigate our risks going into the future. Another big difference in our community these days are the continuing and growing disclosure ordinances. There is a website, which is not posted here. If you Google building performance disclosure ordinances, there's a website that will tell you how many there are across the country. I think there's 31 different municipalities now that require them. And for anyone who doesn't know, this is a move towards transparency and data. This is asking building owners to have to publicly display their miles per gallon. Okay, which is a big challenge because who even has that data? Who has that data organized in a way that is useful and accessible? And there are, you know, lots of voices for and against building disclosure ordinances, but I have to say the focus on data and transparency, whether it's in healthy materials or energy use in buildings, is going to be a tipping point for us because we can easily ignore things when we really don't know the quantifiable impacts. So the things that are different are resiliency planning, requirements, legislative requirements for building performance disclosure ordinances, and then we get some pretty funky things happening in the private and public sector overlap. So an RFP went out recently. Mayor Bloomberg put out an RFP for an innovative development in the private sector, asking private sector developers to take on a project to develop a freestanding, what did they call it, a parcel of land, a man-made parcel of land that would be mixed use, etc., and also double as a storm surge protector. Pretty crafty way of not having to pay for it, huh? You know, I have to give them kudos. But it's taking risk and creating opportunity and doing it in a way that bridges the public and private sector. This is the first I've heard of something like this, so clearly they're going to have to learn as they do it and figure things out. But look at that opportunity and a potential solution to part of a problem, at least in the short term. So yes, there's gloom and doom, and we have statistics that are weighing us down and that are very scary, whether you believe in climate change or you just know that the storms that we have to deal with have real implications. We know that. And people in this room, we've all been motivated for a long time for many reasons to do green building and to be leaders in this industry. But we're not getting there fast enough. My question is, why aren't we getting there fast enough? You know, with all the progress we've made, with the growth of LEED, which is amazing considering, you know, those of us who remember 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it is amazing, the growth of LEED internationally also. But we are so far from getting to where we need to be. Why is that happening? I mean, my hypothesis is that we are stuck at the end of the pipe. We are so fixated on end-of-pipe solutions, rating systems, building codes. Those things are necessary, but they are not sufficient. We don't look up the pipe to the root source of issues. Now, USGBC and LEAD have dragged us kicking and screaming to incorporate metrics and accountability into the design process. And, you know, we were here, we need to be here, and I think we made it that far. Okay? So that was a great start, but I think part of the problem is the way that we've been using LEAD has been the tail wagging the dog. I mean, think about it. There was no green building, zero. LEAD comes on the scene. It's a unifying force. It brings people together around the table to fight, to agree, to talk about what does it mean to build green. But when are they coming together? They're coming together around a table as a team to solve a problem with a schedule and a budget. It's a team, but it's not a long-term committed team. So we have come together around LEAD to solve problems, but then that problem is solved, we walk away, we don't necessarily look up the pipe to the root of the problem. You know, the famous Einstein quote, you know, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing again and again, waiting for a different outcome. You know, I'm going to assume you guys are the exception to the rule, but I go around the country, sometimes in different countries, and I can't tell you how frustrated I am that people are still trying to achieve LEAD, but do the same thing they've always done. And so LEAD gets more expensive, and you know the shtick, I don't have to tell you. So what we need to do is get over our problems of looking at these root causes. You know, we're a left brain community, and now we're being forced to deal with right brain issues. And I think we have to recognize that, and we have to translate this right brain stuff into logical, methodological, and rational approaches. You know, we have to translate behavior and culture into metrics and performance criteria. You know, we're comfortable with checklists, basically. But we have to look at behavior. And honestly, we have to stop the bullshit. There is just way too much marketing out there of green capability that is unfounded. Now, I'm all for marketing to get yourself there. You can't get jobs if you don't market that you can do it, so there's a little, you know, wiggle room for that. But come on, people, we cannot allow our community to continue to have this much marketing and this much real capability. It's not going to get us there. I think it's completely irresponsible professionally. Our standard of care is far from where we need it to be, and the owners who are getting more sophisticated know it. You know, we're on design team selection committees, and I can't tell you how many times they've said, you know, I don't want to hear how many lead APs you have, because that tells me nothing. You know, do you track and measure the performance of your projects? Do you learn from that? Like, what's the real stuff you're doing? Okay? We need to stop this. And by we, I'm accepting you guys who are clearly the choir, but our colleagues, the industry at large, is here. We're here. So on the good side of things, what really fundamentally makes the difference between doing things the old way and doing things the new way? You know, think about it, and no, it's not money. The good news is, it's 4 things. 4 things are easy to remember, right? Not 67, not 72. In order of importance, first of all, it's mindset. How we think, what we think our role is on a project, our assumptions. You know, think of energy years ago. The mindset around energy was to meet code, right? Not exceed code, LEED platinum, net zero. Old mindset, meet code. New mindset, LEED, net zero. Whoa, is that different? I had a room full of 200 mechanical engineers, and I asked them, what is your role? And you know what they said? By and large, pretty much in unison, to make it work. Okay? And that is not a mindset that is going to help a whole team move the ball forward. So we need to really be aware of our mindsets. That rolls into the next thing, process, which is really multiple mindsets, right? You got people around the table, you got the yes people, yeah, we're there. You've got the no people, this is stupid, it's a fad. And then you've got the dangerous people who say yes, but they're really no inside. And that's the scary part. So mindset is important. Then the next order of magnitude is the process. We have to stop being insane. We have to stop doing the same siloed, fragmented process that doesn't allow for optimizing decision-making and collaboration. Once we're looking at that, then it's about how we use our tools, our analysis, when and how we use it qualitatively and quantitatively. And then last but not least, as my daughter says, the green bling, the stuff that we buy. It's important, but if we just buy green stuff, half of it gets beat out anyway. We're not dealing with mindset, we're still using process, and that's why it gets beat out. So this is my holy grail for really doing things differently. And you know, this came to me after 12, 13 years and kind of synthesized it. So I like to share it because I think it really gets at the crux of things. One of the germane things in this that I could spend 8 hours on is the integrative design process, or the lie of the integrative design process. Now, I'm not asking you this question, so do not put your hands up, but mentally, how many of you in your daily practice who do design and construction, for how many of you is IDP part of your approach to project management? For how many of you is it a fundamental way that you approach delivering a project? I don't want to see hands because I want you to be honest with yourselves. It's not usual business as usual. And so most of you have probably seen Bill's slide diagram of this. For anyone who's interested, there's a group of us nationally who created an ANSI standard for integrative design. So I think the biggest problem with IDP is people are like, what is that really? It's kind of fuzzy. How do you what does that actually mean? And we do a workshop on IDP to help firms like figure out, and I'll talk more about this at 3:30, what do you do at every step of the project to make sure it's really happening? And how can you measure that it's happening and not just say, oh, we do a charrette? If one more person tells me they do a charrette, and that's why they do IDP, I will stab them with a fork. I'm serious. It's not a charrette. So we have to get serious about that. And here's an example of one of the firms that we work with that's in our Green Firm Certification Program. They create a roadmap for their projects. They have one roadmap for commercial, one roadmap for their residential projects, and one roadmap for their institutional projects. And roadmaps in firms that we worked with, some of them are diagrammatic and beautiful, some of them are a checklist. It doesn't matter what it looks like, it matters that you know what you're doing and how you're doing it and how you're working with your clients. That's just an example. So we need to shift. We need to shift from the champions, the 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 champions in the office, to a culture that really institutionalizes sustainability in a way that people practically know what their job is and how their job aligns with the goals that the company has and the corporate values that the company has. One good sign that we've seen is that the green teams of yore still exist. They may not be called green teams, but their purpose has changed. And this is an indication, a really good indication. The purpose has changed from we're the green team, we champion recycling, and we try to get brown bag lunches together, to we are quality control, or we are integration. So the larger companies that have green teams, especially multiple offices, and this is a bottom line business thing too, their role has shifted from that fundamental kind of early day thing to being much more wrapped up around quality control and integrations of functions. And utilization rates tend to be around 80%, and the question is, how do you use that remaining 20%? Do you use it for R&D? Do you use it for innovation? Do you use it for knowledge management? And that's a question for the design professionals in particular. How do you do that to accelerate the success within your firm? So we're at this point in our history of moving from individual successes and ABC companies that have lead projects in their portfolio to we build green all the time, to some level, whatever level it is, whether it's LEED certified or not. Because frankly, at this point in time, with the skills and the knowledge that's out there, there's no excuse. And I know some of you have thought bubbles saying, well, our clients don't ask for it. Let me tell you, out of the last 30 firms that we certified, and these are leading, profitable firms, architecture, engineering, construction, not one of them does it on demand. They have internalized their own standards around green building. Many adopted from LEED, some not, and they do it as a best practice and standard of care for their projects. Now that doesn't mean they could be LEED Platinum on every project, but it means that they have a minimum standard of care which includes the basic design practices and principles of sustainability. So that's a challenge to you. We can't allow this anymore. We can't do it because there's no demand, because you know what? Here's the secret. If it is being done, it can be done, right? It is being done. So guess what? If it's being done, it can be done. And the question is just how to get over the panic and the stress and the anxiety of figuring out how to do it. Okay, so with all the marketing, where are we really? We have this report card that you could do. How green is my firm? It's free online, SurveyMonkey, you get the results. And I encourage you to do it because people get some surprising results from that are good flags for what they can do in the future. And this report card, the results the firms usually fall into one of three categories. Either, yay, gold star, you've been doing this for 20 years and you know, it's no big deal for you. Or boo, believe it or not, you're not really doing anything. And for the vast majority of firms that take the report card, they're at the random acts of sustainability phase. We've got LEED projects in our portfolio, we have LEED APs in our office, we've done it, but we don't do it all the time, for whatever reason or whatever that means. Maybe we do it only on schools but not in hospitals. Whatever it is, they're at the random act stage, and that's how I would characterize our industry overall. We need to get beyond the random acts. I'll give you a quick overview. This survey keeps growing over time and the results don't really change that much. So this survey was given, there were 1,700 firms across the country, many of whom have offices outside of the US as well. And the responses were across a wide range of seniority levels within the firms. So basically it's good. It's good to have a mixed feedback from firms varying from 20 employees to monstrous 45,000, mostly in the 1 to 6,000 range were the big companies. All right, so in terms of leadership, which is the theme of the day, right? In terms of leadership, where are we? Well, we're really good at marketing. But when it comes to internally, most design firms, if you ask the staff, what is the company truly committed to? They say, we talk about it, but we don't walk the talk. We don't do it in our facilities and operations, and we don't do it we don't really know what we're doing across all the projects. So there's a big disconnect between the public face and the internal face, and how we get there. And having clear, smart goals, specific, measurable goals around projects. What is our performance criteria internally? You know, if you're a widget manufacturer, a car manufacturer, darn straight you have internal standards for quality control. We have some work to do around refining those in the design and construction world. Example of one of the firms that we certified, they have been doing it for quite some time. Look at the difference, and that's just an indicator. This is an architecture, engineering, construction firm, 200 people. Man, they do it all the time. Everybody, it's just like no-brainer. They track everything. They have dashboards for every project, whether it's LEED or not LEED. If it's LEED, they use the LEED criteria. If it's not LEED, they use the White & Company criteria, which is a version of LEED watered down for things that they think are best practices to do all the time. That is excellence. That's a company I want to hire, right? Because I'm going to get their A team all the time because they're all the A team. Infrastructure and support. Does HR support this? Do the job descriptions exist that incorporate sustainability? Performance reviews? Are the tools and resources there? A lot of the time, they're not. It's inconsistent. Okay? Project delivery. Basically, we're not there where there's a methodology that the company understands, that all the project architects or project managers or construction managers understand how to deliver sustainability at a consistent level. Same thing around partnering and collaboration. So you can look at this survey at your own leisure and look at the responses. The observations basically are that we have a bunch of gaps, from leadership to how we deliver projects, etc. And we have to address them. But the good news is, because I'm trying not to be gloom and doom so much, the good news is that the firms who have been doing this and have made true commitments, Have clear accountability structures for sustainability. It doesn't have to be a label. Sustainability doesn't have to be in anyone's title, although it can be. But people have to understand how they're delivering on it, right? They have to know how their job aligns with the goals. Standard practices, design standards, collaborations, how you use BIM to enhance collaboration, changes in workflow, and meeting lead without the extra effort. One of the firms, Snyder Langston, that we just certified, construction company in California, you know what they measure? This is so cool. They measure their conversions. They measure, and this is a general contractor. This is not an architect. You know, they're not involved at day one most of the time. They measure how many times a project has come to them not green, and they've been able to make it green or even LEED certified. Why? Because it's like breathing for them. It's not hard. Everyone understands how to do it. They have the systems in place. They have the processes, the SOPs. It's not a big bar for them, and they can make the business case compellingly, and they measure their conversions. That is just so cool to me. All right, so what are the secrets, now that I've been harassing you for some time? What do you do, and how do you do it? The secret ingredients to this has been my life's passion, honestly. When I started in architecture, the reason I left is because I was so frustrated with our firm and what it was doing, and nobody, it's like the emperor's not wearing any clothes. The client didn't understand that they were actually losing money because of how our building systems were so not integrated, and the structural systems were ridiculously more expensive than they needed to be, and on and on. So this has been my life's passion for forever. All right, first of all, we have to start asking different questions. And the first question can't be, what flavor of LEED is this going to be? It's not a bad question to ask, but it's not the first question. We have to ask about designing health, and how do we design resiliency? What does that even mean to us? What is the carrying capacity of this place if you're doing larger civil work or master planning work? Does anyone even know what carrying capacity is or how to calculate it? Come on, I'm just preaching to the choir here. How can our open spaces function as natural machines to support human activity? I mean, these are some big questions, but these are the kinds of questions that I've been very fortunate enough to be a part of. I mean, I don't do project consulting anymore, but we did it for many years, and we worked on hundreds of projects, and what a paradigm shift the project is when it starts off with questions like these, right? All right, so the secret is this is not about LEED. LEED's great, it's in there, it's just not the first thing. It's about methodology, collaboration, culture, corporate culture, and your use of technology. It's not just about buying the right stuff, it's about all that other stuff and how technology fits into it, which includes BIM and other ways of collaborating together. Now, the framework that we've developed over time, which is the framework that's the basis of our certification program, or a roadmap for you to take back and use in your own firm, it basically falls into these 5 categories. Looks like LEED should be very comfortable, right, to look at. Leadership, strategy, and policy. Is your leadership committed? Are they committed in a way that the staff and employees actually believe and feel? Are there measurable and tangible evidence of that in the company, both in the operations and in the management of projects and people? So leadership, strategy, and policy are important. Project delivery. Now, for all of you who aren't architects, engineers, and contractors, it could be program management. If you're at a university, you know, how effective is your management of these programs? If you're a building owner, we certify affordable housing developers for HUD. It's about how do you manage your portfolio and maintain consistent quality and continuous improvement. Collaboration. I've harped on that quite a bit. Support and infrastructure, HR, communications, tools and resources, the foundation upon which you do your work. That all has to be aligned. And then outcomes and metrics. What do you measure? What do you track? One of my favorite Bucky Fuller quotes, not everything that counts should be counted, and not everything that is counted counts. You got that? Not everything that counts should be counted, not everything that's counted counts. Man, is that the truth. Okay, so, you know, I put up a little clock here and then I didn't look at the time. So I lost track of how much time I have. Just give me a 5-minute warning, somebody. All right, so I'm going to look at this in a little bit more detail, but not a lot. In the workshop at 3:30, we're going to go through this and actually do some exercises around setting these strategies. So first of all, leadership, and we talked about this for a lot, Colonel Baker talked about this morning, and someone raised a question about leading from the middle. Man, that's where it's at. Few of the companies we work with are committing to sustainability beginning with the CEO. Sometimes that happens, but a lot of times it's coming from the middle. It's coming from management in the middle. And there are specific strategies and tactics, if you're trying to lead from the middle, that you can do. And I'll get to that in the workshop. But leadership, it's not just at the top. It's cultivating leadership at many levels and understanding people's strengths and aligning those strengths with the corporate goals and missions that they're trying to create. And having very clear expectations for everyone. Second, project delivery. Well, you have to have the skills and knowledge, you have to have a comfort level, and you have to deal with this process issue. And you can do it in many ways, but if there is a project kickoff that starts without mapping the critical path decisions, you have already set yourself back and you have already failed to a certain degree. There isn't a project alive that shouldn't start with the major stakeholders sitting down and mapping out, if we're trying to achieve this in energy or this in water or this in materials, what analysis does someone have to do, by when, and how are we going to make those decisions? You got to sit down and map that out, and we even advocate for doing that before all the contracts are executed. Pay people a little up front so that they can clarify their scopes and role on the project. That way you can control cost on the project. There's a lot of detail in that I'm glossing over, but you got to own the process the way you own the product. Right now we just we're happy with dysfunction. So we can take control of that, and we can integrate quality control into the process. Infrastructure and support systems, knowledge management, which usually doesn't happen because we don't have the time or the resources or the energy to really make it happen, but there are some good examples out there. Having an educational plan that aligns with your goals. So Woods Bagot is an architectural firm based out of Australia, has offices in New York and on the West Coast, and there's a few thousand staff now, I think. They have a vision and a mission as a company to only work on net zero projects by the year 2020. I might get this wrong, 2020. They have a very smart goal that says by a certain date, the only projects we will do will be net zero. Okay, that's what I call a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. That's what they set. So in order to do that, guess what? They established some partnerships with Lawrence Berkeley National Labs and Burrow-Happold Engineering, because they know they can't do it by themselves and they don't have the tools and resources to make that happen. So they had to form this collaboration. And guess what? They have an education plan that says, oh, if that's where we're going, this person needs to know this, that person needs to know that, every project manager needs to do this. So they have an education plan, but it's not this like, oh, education plan, like get your CEUs. It's here's where we're going, and here's how the education plan is one way to support us achieving that goal. So we need to be more strategic about those things. Communication systems, management processes, infrastructure and support covers this whole kind of foundation and bedrock for how you deliver your projects to your clients, or how you deliver your programs within your institution, or how you deliver your widgets from your company. Partnering and collaboration. We are so complacent and happy to live with dysfunction, aren't we? If you ask someone, what do you hate about, what bothers you about, being an architect or being an engineer, you can listen to someone complain about that for quite a long time. Architects complain about engineers complain about architects, there's all kinds of barriers, but we keep doing it. And that's the emperor's not wearing any clothes to me, like, come on people, why? We're creating this problem, we can change it, and people are changing it. So we need to understand what those relationships should look like. Now, so there's a few of you who have heard this story before, but one of the things, we had one experience with an architecture firm that we were certifying that said, okay, now that we're doing this and we're really committed, we got an RFP for a new university building, and we really want to do it right. We want to do everything perfectly. Can you give us the names of engineers in Canada? That's not funny to you? I thought that was kind of fun. I was like, Canada? You work with 13 engineers in the Boston area, you know. They said, yeah, but they don't give us what we need. We've had these relationships forever, but we're not happy with them. And I said, well, first of all, you shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, you have long-standing working relationships with these engineering firms. Maybe it's something you can improve together. So they said, okay, they made some calls. They didn't get very far. So then they had what they call, this is their term, they said, we're going to have a come to Jesus meeting with all of our top engineers. We're going to get them in one room and we're going to use the peer pressure. We're going to say, here's what we want. You're either on our train or you're off our train. And I thought, wow, that's great. What a great idea. But guess what the problem with that was? Anyone have any guesses?
Everybody jumped off?
No.
It was their train, not everyone's train.
Right, their train. No, the problem was when we were thinking about putting that meeting together and they were going to say, here's what we want, they could complain about the engineers for 45 minutes, but to articulate exactly what they expected was not clear. And you know what? That was fabulous because that was a turning point for them. They spent 3 months, not a solid 3 months, but over a 3-month period, the partners sat down, the principal sat down and said, okay, for mechanical, landscape, for our major consultants, let's figure out what we do want and be able to articulate that to them. Imagine that. And they did, and they had their come to Jesus meeting or their come to engineers meeting, and their engineers came, and it was a dialogue. It was not a, here's what we want, give it to us. It was, here's what we want, and they said, well, okay, then here's what we need. But that was the beginning of a dialogue that was very, very productive and really changed the course of how they worked together. So you have control. You don't have to live in a bad relationship. Who's the relationship advisor from the newspapers, whatever. You can change your relationship. Last thing, outcomes, metrics, feedback loops. The 2030 commitment, the best thing about that is forcing people to actually measure what is the performance of our project. How is this doing? And man, we have a long way to go because getting that information is very difficult. Not everyone shares it, but we're moving towards that direction, looking both at the portfolio performance as well as the corporate sustainability footprint, which also includes social impact baseline. And there's a new, I'll get to it in the tool section, Cascadia region has put out a new tool called JUST, J-U-S-T, which is kind of like a rating system to look at social equity issues. So, our industry is moving there. So let me talk about tools for a second. So obviously, mindset, process, those are the things I think are most important in making the difference. But what new tools are out there that can help us do this? There's a bunch. Is there anything up there that's new to you? Yeah? Okay. So far, okay. So good. There's stuff there that's new to you. I am not going to go into these in depth because we'd be here all day, and I'm ready, sleepy from lunch too. And I'm sure this PowerPoint will be available to you, and whatever, you can come up and take one of these and get in touch with me, whatever. But there's a bunch of new tools out there, and I'm going to talk about it quickly. Living Building Challenge is beyond LEED. It's looking at red list chemicals, net zero building. It's on the bleeding edge. But it's out there, and there are projects out there, and that's good because the bleeding edge also contributes to moving the market. So you can take a closer look at that. The natural step, that's it. You don't have to buy anything. The natural step was there was an oncologist in Sweden, Dr. Karl-Henrik Robert, who saw the connection between environmental harm and public health, in particular cancer. And his life's work was about creating this 4-part framework to help people make different kinds of choices and decisions. This is a great way to start thinking about a process, about a project, because it breaks down the silos. So we did a visitor center for Audubon in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, and Audubon, you can't get greener. So they started looking at the natural step, which is saying that we want to reduce the extraction of substances concentrated in the Earth's crust, synthetics produced by society, and degradation of habitat, and we want social equity. So we looked at this, and on the Audubon project they said, well, we're going to be off the grid, we're going to have composting toilets, what else can we do? And the general contractor said, Well, our labor comes in from Worcester, which is a 2-hour each way trip. What if we shifted the construction process to be off-season so that the laborers could just stay there for a whole week? We'd save a lot of fossil fuel from the back and forth. So looking at that at the beginning of a project and not taking out that lead checklist enabled some bigger thinking and bigger decisions that actually had quite a lot of cost savings for the project. So that's a great thing. Whoever does not use Building Green, lead user, you're living in a forest somewhere in the dark. Everyone should be subscribed to Building Green. Lead user is a phenomenal tool with the best experts possible. Green Spec for products, environmental building news. This tool, there is no comparison. This tool everyone should use, period. And I'm not paid for any of these things, so this is just things that I appreciate. You all know about Architecture 2030 and the 2030 commitment and the partnership with AIA. One of the things that might be useful to you immediately is that the companies that have taken the 2030 commitment, many of them submit their sustainability action plans, which you can download. Now, we've made this easier. On our website, on the resources page, we've gone through all of the plans that are here and picked out the ones we thought were the best. So you can go here, or you can go to our website, which I'll show you later, and go down to the plans and take a look at them. The 2030 districts. Now, eco-districts are a new thing. You can look up eco-district. This is about toolkits for looking at larger scale developments and planning. And 2030 and AIA are also looking at eco-districts. Maria launched the 2030 palette at Greenbuild, whoever was there. This looks spectacular. I haven't dug in myself yet, but it's a free tool, a design aid to help architects look at specific things, strategies, and look at how to do that. So take a look at that. Saphira is a plugin for SketchUp. Now, I don't know how many of you use SketchUp, but maybe they'll do it for other platforms too, which gives you real-time feedback about the impacts of your decisions as you're in early design. Another one that I forgot to put up there is called D-Profiler. D-Profiler, which is for early stage designing to get real-time feedback around cost and environmental impact as well. So D-Profiler, I forgot to put it up there. This last one, Envision Rating System, this is for civil engineers and larger scale projects. This looks at the infrastructure side of the equation that LEED does not yet look at in this way. Even LEED ND does not get into the weeds on these issues. So if you're a large-scale civil engineer looking at large-scale master planning, take a look at the Envision Rating System. It gives you lots of guidance. And we have lots of problems with our infrastructure, but we have a way of looking at infrastructure in a different way that's much more cost savings. And then last tool, last but not least, is our own certification for firms. LEED is for buildings. We're about organizations that they have the capability to deliver consistent high quality, only way to prove that you can actually do it. And then making it happen. The last thing I want to pounce on or hammer on is that you're not going to get there just by focusing on projects. You will just be frustrated. You'll only achieve some level of success. You need to engage in intentional change management, which includes your culture. It includes how people do their jobs and how you operate your offices, what you buy. It's everything. And you can't get there by doing random acts. You have to have a roadmap. You can use our roadmap, you can make your own roadmap, but you need a roadmap. You need to understand what your goals are and how you're going to get there as an organization. Let's see. There's a bunch of companies, I think I've run out of time. I was going to tell you stories about each of these companies that we worked with and how they've done it, but I poorly timed my talk, and I will do that more in the workshop. And I just want to thank you guys for having me. The future is in our hands, and we can't mess around with this stuff anymore. We can't dance at the edges. We need to dive in, make a commitment, make it real, make it measurable. And the good news is, the proof is, that doing it and doing it well is profitable, it is good business, even though it's terrifically scary. And we have a bunch of resources that are free. here that you can access, including our resources page. There's a LinkedIn community for SPI Leadership Circle, so you can share ideas and successes and all kinds of stuff. So there are resources out there to help you do this. And if you come to the workshop at 3:30, we're going to go from here into, all right, let's set strategies. Which ones are effective? What bumps are we going to come upon, and how will we get around those? And how can we lead from the middle? So that's it for now. Thank you. Sorry, I was overcoming my lunch